Κυρίες και κύριοι, καλησπέρα σας. Σήμερα συναντούμε έναν πολύ σημαντικό Ελληνοαμερικανό συγγραφέα. Τον άνθρωπο για τον οποίο ο Στίβεν Κίνγκ είπε ότι είναι ίσως ο μεγαλύτερος εν ζωή συγγραφέας αστυνομικών ιστοριών. Κύριε Πελεκάνο, καλησπέρα και σε εσάς. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's been 10 years since your last visit in Greece.
Yeah. Last time I came, I flew into a different airport, so.
Before economic crisis in America, in Greece.
Yep.
Have you noticed any changes?
Well, you have a subway now, which is great. You know, the subways transform the city if you let them. I know in Washington it changed the whole city when they opened up a subway system because every place there was a stop, things grew around it. So it's a really positive development. That's a big deal.
Your 19th book, The Double, has been just published here in Greece, in Greek. Do you speak any Greek?
A little bit. I'm not going to embarrass myself, though, so sorry I can't help you out today.
So you can understand...
Yeah, so you have to be careful what you say about me when, you know, don't speak Greek around me and say bad things because I know all the words.
Which mystery Spiro Loukas is about to solve this time?
Well, he's a veteran who came back from the Iraq War, a Marine, and he works for a criminal defense attorney downtown as a street detective. And actually these guys employ veterans quite a bit, so it was a real sort of organic scenario that I came up with. But he takes these side jobs, and so he goes after things that were stolen from somebody and for a fee of 40% of the value. So there's always two cases in these books that he's following. The one traditional case given to him by the attorney and the one that he's doing on his own. And in this one, a painting has been stolen from a woman by a sexual predator who had kind of used her up in the bedroom and then taken her valuable painting, and she hires him to get it back, and that's what sets him off on this journey. The reason the book is called The Double is that the painting that he's going after is of two men, and the painting is called The Double. But really the painting it's based on an actual painting that hangs in my house by an American Impressionist. And it's really a painting of one man. It's the duality of one man. That's what the painting means. So he's going after this guy, and he soon realizes that this guy, Billy King, is the darker side of him. It's his doppelganger. It's his double. And when he realizes this, he thinks, well, I got to destroy this guy because by destroying him, I can destroy the dark side of myself. And that's what the book is really about.
Yes, I was about to ask you that there are two conflicts, a conflict in the exterior and in the interior.
That's right. I mean, there's three kinds of conflict in drama. It's man against man against nature, man against himself. I think the most interesting one is man against himself. It's that internal conflict that you're always battling.
Your father was an ex-Marine veteran, Mr. Pelecanos. He fought in the Pacific during the World War II.
That's right. Yep. There's no such thing as an ex-Marine, but go ahead.
They say that ex-Marines, when they come back, they distance themselves from even their loved ones. Is it true?
I don't know about that. I can tell you that my dad, he distanced himself from the war and his war experience. He never talked with me about what he actually did over there. And I'm not going to say never, but very, very rarely. I had to really press him, you know, to get anything out of him. But I found out from his friends what he did, and it was pretty intense and horrific. He killed a lot of Japanese, you know, and a lot of it was hand-to-hand combat. And he was a very quiet guy when he came back from the war. Pretty much for the rest of his life. My father was a very internal guy. That is until he was working in the diner. He was very gregarious with the customers and outwardly, you know, had a big personality. But when he wasn't working, he would sort of shut down and be very quiet.
It was easy or difficult for you to talk to him?
I think, you know, just we had a good relationship, but in a lot of ways, I'm like him. I'm not a very talkative person either. I'm pretty quiet. So there's that thing between men where you can sort of have a peaceful coexistence and not talk much. And, you know, I was on a book tour with the American writer Michael Connelly, and he's like a lot like me. He's a much more successful writer than I am, but very quiet guy. And we would drive from between cities 3 or 4 hours, let's say from Portland to Seattle, Washington. And we didn't say a word to each other. And neither one of us ever thought, gosh, I wonder if he likes me or he doesn't like me or something. Men can do that, you know what I mean?
But there was a code.
There was a code and sort of like an agreement, like we don't need to talk. You know? It doesn't mean anything if we don't talk. And I knew my dad loved me, so I never really doubted that.
If you were to talk to one of your parents, though, it would be your mother.
I think, yeah. My dad was working all the time, too, so just naturally. And I grew up in a house of women. When my dad wasn't around, it was my mother and my sisters. So, and I think, you know, growing up in a house of women is what makes a guy hopefully respect women more.
You don't talk much, but you listen.
Yeah, I'm a good listener.
And you observe.
Yeah. Even when I was a salesman, you know, I had a lot of sales jobs back in the day, and women's shoes and things of that nature. And, you know, I didn't talk a lot. A lot of the salesmen would talk themselves out of a sale. They'd talk too much. I would want to say to these guys, you know, shut up and listen to the customer once in a while, because they're trying to tell you that they want to buy something. You don't need to talk. And even in those jobs, I didn't really talk a lot. I'm much more comfortable kind of quietly being there and listening to people.
Nick Stefanos, Spiros Lucas, you usually use Greek Americans in your novels. How American readers get on with your Greek Americans?
Well, I mean, I hope they accept it, but honestly, it's not like I'm at the top of the bestseller list or anything like that. I mean, if you want to get there, you're better off doing a white American protagonist and an all-American kind of person, you know. But I was never really concerned with that. You know, from the beginning, it was my intention to sort of showcase Greek Americans in my books because it hadn't been done before. And when it is done, it's a stereotype usually. And I wanted to correct that and humanize everybody, not make all the Greeks good, you know, perfect people, give them flaws too, just like everybody else. And then, you know, once people get used to that, then they accept us as part of the great melting pot. You know what I mean? It's all part of the process. So,
what are the flaws of Greek people?
What are the flaws? I don't know. I mean, look, I don't know Greeks. I can tell you Greek Americans are sometimes, you know, closed-minded. Sometimes they've gotten very conservative over the years. When the immigrants came from Greece, my parents' generation, they were all FDR Democrats. And, you know, because Roosevelt, you know, he gave jobs to people and he gave Social Security and all these social programs that benefited the Greeks. So what happened was the Greeks then had children who became successful. They started making money, and all of a sudden they became Reagan Republicans. You know, because what does conservative mean? The root word of it is conserve. You want to keep what you have, right? All of a sudden you don't want to pay taxes anymore, and you don't want to, you know, you don't want to reach back and help people who are less fortunate than you. And that's what happened to a lot of the Greeks in Americas. They became very conservative. But my family stayed, you know, I mean, we're still Democrats.
You've mentioned in an interview of yours that Greeks are a little arrogant. They look down on people because they are successful now.
Yeah, that's just what I was talking about. I mean, I think, here's the thing is, I feel like, I'm just talking about America now, okay? We have this tremendous opportunity to live in America and benefit from it, and we have. And I'm a capitalist too. I'm somebody that likes to make money as well. But my feeling is that if you are successful and you've benefited from living in that society, you should be willing to accommodate people who haven't been as fortunate or successful as you. And some people will say, well, if they want to be successful, they can just work harder. But that's not the way it works in a capitalist society. There's always going to be people who have it up here and people down here who don't have it, a percentage of the population. And I think those people should have the same chances as everybody else, which means equal education, equal opportunities, equal access to jobs and programs as the people who have money. So that's all I was talking about is, you know, just because you've got it, don't forget everybody that you left behind.
That was the idea of Adam Smith in the first place, to benefit yourself and your community. But we distanced ourselves of this idea over the years. You have great social awareness, Mr. Pelecanos. You use racism is an important issue to you. You are very sensitive. How do you explain the fact that even communities that suffered long-standing racism, as the black community, tend to be racist themselves over other minorities, the homosexuals, for instance?
Yeah, that's true. It's a good question, but I don't really have an answer for it. Black Americans, African Americans are very conservative with regards to gay rights, for example. And a lot of that comes from the church. You know, we all use the same Bible. In the Bible it says that a man shouldn't lie down with another man, okay? And I've read it also. But I really don't care what's in the Bible. There's right and wrong, you know. And the Bible was written by men. It wasn't written by God. Okay, it was written by men, and all men are fallible. They can be wrong. So I would not base my beliefs on what I read in the Bible. And the Bible to me is a great book that I can take many good things from, but it's not the handbook on how to live your life. So that particular thing that you're talking about comes out of that, and I think, and I'm hoping that people will get more enlightened about it. And the way they get more enlightened is when you live with people. You know, you live around gay people that are married and so on, and you see it, and they're on your block, and all of a sudden you see them every day, and you're like, wait a minute, they're not any different than we are. You know what I mean? And that's how it works. It's the same thing as racism. When people started living together in neighborhoods, they weren't so afraid of each other anymore. And things got better, and they will get better in the United States.
You are the proud father of 3 adopted children. The 2 of them are black.
Yep.
Do you think that adopting black children made your parent work a little more difficult, plus the fact that they were adopted?
I can only tell you that in my family it wasn't like that. And they always knew who they were. We live in a neighborhood that's primarily minorities, black and Hispanic, so that everybody they saw was like them. We didn't try to make them white or anything like that, you know. We haven't had that problem. I mean, the problem that we've had as parents are the problem that black parents have had in the United States, meaning fearing for their children to go out in the streets at night, not knowing what's going to happen to them, if they're going to be treated differently by the police. Will they be treated differently when they walk into a store, followed around by the people that own the store, because they think they're going to steal something. And my sons have been hassled their whole lives in my neighborhood by police. Their whole lives. They've been arrested. They've been pulled out of their cars for the way they look. And you see what's happening right now in the United States. It's not a myth. I mean, you know, you had the thing in Ferguson, but how about this thing in New York, too? You've got this middle-aged black man who was selling cigarettes on the street, and police put him in a chokehold and they murdered him, basically. They murdered him. And I guarantee you that wouldn't have happened to me if I was selling cigarettes. They might have said, move along or don't do that. But nobody would have put me in a chokehold. That guy got killed because he was black. And that's the reality of the situation in America. There's no such thing as post-racial America. The myth that was brought up about the time of Obama's election, it's a myth. However, I will say that it's going to get better. And the reason it's going to get better is that this is the ethos of an older generation. Younger people don't feel this way. And when people my age and older start dying out, the world's going to get better.
You live in D.C., the same neighborhood you grew up.
Yeah.
You built a house there. That's very Greek, to build a house in the place we grow up. And I'm wondering, now that you can live wherever you want, and maybe it will be better for your children also, you thought of leaving, moving away?
No, it's too late for that. My kids are grown.
They don't want to leave.
No, they've left. I mean, my sons are on their own, and my daughter's a senior in high school, so we're not, my wife and I will now move deeper into the city and get a smaller house. But we're done with that part of our lives. I'm not going to up and move to a white neighborhood now or anything like that. I'm moving deeper into the city. It's more fun.
You like to be where the action is?
Yeah, well, I love cities, and I ride my bike everywhere, or I take the subway. It's great.
What do you like about them?
The action. Yeah. I think cities are sort of like miracles. The fact that, I go to my hotel room tonight and there's water coming out of the taps. You can never figure that out. Everybody's got water in their rooms and plumbing and so on. And then there's places to go at night and you can walk into a bar and talk to a stranger or whatever. There's a time where I like being in the country, and I have a house down at the beach, and that's where I kayak and I swim and everything else. And it's very quiet down there, but it's too quiet, I like being in the city.
Your characters are described in details, their conflicts, their inner conflicts. Delving in the core of their personalities was a sort of psychoanalysis for you?
For me personally?
Yes.
Well, you have to reach into yourself when you're writing about all these people, and remember that these books come out of your psyche. That's whether you want them to or not. They're getting dragged out of you. So that's why there might be a certain sameness to the books. If you look at my library, and somebody might say, "Well, he's hitting the same notes all the time." It's because it's coming out of me, And I really try to talk to people a lot. And, I didn't want to write a book about veterans. These last couple of books have been about veterans. I didn't want to make stuff up. So I went down to the Walter Reed Army Medical Hospital, which is near my house, and I got a pass. And I went in there, and I spent time with the soldiers and Marines who were injured. They'd come back from the war. I also talked to the doctors. I talked to the psychiatrists. And I sort of started to build characters from that, from the traits that I had picked up when talking to these people. And, so you got to do your research.
How important is research for you? You also go with the policemen, with the cars, with the police cars.
Yeah, I love that part of it. It's really fascinating to me, and that's how I build the story, because I don't have an outline for a book ever. I never outline, so I have to go out and find the story. And the way I do it is I ride with police and dog catchers, probation officers, attorneys. I go to trials. I go to murder trials. I go to jails quite a bit, and prisons. I do reading programs in prisons, but when I go, I'm working too, because I'm listening to guys talk, and it's invaluable. And then a lot of what I do is just quietly sitting in a bar and listening to people, or riding the subway or riding the bus, listening to people, It's very important to do that. And that's how you get the voices too, and the poetry in the language.
The marketing people must have advised you not to use black lead characters in your novels.
It's been suggested, yeah, gently. None of them want to seem like they're, that they themselves have any racist tendencies. So they've been very gentle about it. Like, why don't you try a white, and I have. I mean, I always have white characters in my books, as many as there are black, but the reality is, where I live, Washington, up until very recently, was a majority black city. And if you're going to write the kind of books that I write, it's illogical and it's unrealistic to have books with all white characters in them. And you know, so I'm just doing what I should do naturally, I think.
I like what you do. And I like that you do that you make that choice. You've been quite wild when you grew up in Washington, and your first novel you wanted to write was a punk novel. You've listened to punk music back then?
Yeah, in D.C. we had a big punk movement, you know, and starting out with Minor Threat and all these bands and Fugazi and all the bands on the Discord label. And I grew up listening to that stuff. I was active in that. And it was really inspirational to me because they were people who were not trained musicians. They weren't connected to anybody in the music industry, and yet they went out and made music anyway, made records. And some of it was art, you know? So I thought, well, it's the same thing with me. I don't know how to write a book. Never taken a writing class. I've never been to New York. I don't know any publishers. I don't know any agents. What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to do what they did. I'm going to pick up my guitar and play, you know what I mean? In a sense. Meaning, I'm going to go sit in that room and try and write a book. And that's what I did. And those early books I think of as punk rock detective novels, you know? They were written by a much younger guy, obviously. And but very much an inspiration from that local movement, and which I'm thankful for. And those people are now middle-aged people like me, and they've gone out and done good things with their lives. They're volunteers and teachers and that sort of thing. So the punk rock thing in D.C. was not like it was in other places. It wasn't a violent sort of subculture. It was a different punk rock that people know. It's a very positive thing.
If you are to choose a soundtrack for every decade of your life, what would you say? We've reached the point that you even appreciated Kazantzidis.
Yeah, that makes me an old man, I guess. That just goes to show you that I like all kinds of music. I mean, I heard that song on a Rough Guide to Grease CD, and I loved it. And I just thought, this guy has soul like Marvin Gaye and Curtis Mayfield have soul. It's the same. It's a spiritual thing. It's not a black person or a white person. It doesn't matter. It's singing from the soul, you know. And I tried to put that song in the wire, and we couldn't.
You did, the Greek season.
Well, we used another of his songs, a different song, because we couldn't clear that one. But you know, I listen to all kinds of music. I listen to movie soundtracks when I write, while I'm writing, westerns in particular. And I still love soul and funk, punk rock. Just like three guitar attack rock, all sorts of rock and roll, jazz. You know, I lived in New Orleans for several years, working on a TV show. I got to experience that, which was phenomenal for me, to hear that music every night and go out into the clubs and hear it. So, you know, music's a big part of my life, yeah.
You've enjoyed your stay in New Orleans more than your stay in Baltimore, though Baltimore was closer to your home.
Yeah, I drove back and forth to Baltimore every day for that show, and it's about an hour away. So it added 2 hours to my day. When you're already working 14 hours a day, it's a big deal, you know. But I went to live in New Orleans for Treme, when I did Treme for HBO. And it was the best experience of my life, really, because I had never lived anywhere outside of Washington, and I never thought that I would. And I never thought that I would find a place that I liked as much or better. And as soon as I got there, I fell in love with it. And so I feel really fortunate that I had that opportunity to go down there and stay for a while.
What did you like especially in New Orleans?
I think here's the thing: is New Orleans is a black city, you know, in the way that Washington used to be. When I was a kid, Washington was 75–80% black, and now it's about 50%. And it's, even though it's gotten nicer, you know what I mean? The economy's improved. There's nicer amenities and so on. We've lost a lot of our character, a lot of soul. It's no longer Chocolate City. And when I got to New Orleans, it was a majority black city, like Washington had been when I was a kid. And I immediately felt like, wow, I'm home again, you know. And then the food is great. The music is great everywhere you go. People are very gregarious. So if you go to, just say, the grocery store, you can start talking to people when you're waiting in line with your groceries. And you make friends. You don't do that up north. I mean north of Washington. Places like New York and Boston, it's not like that.
Though you are to go to New York.
Yeah, I'll be working in New York.
I don't hear you very enthusiastic about it.
New York is
You don't sound.
I mean, New York is a singular city in the world. It's the most cosmopolitan city, arguably, in the world. But it's a little fast for me now. You gotta, you come out of the subway, you gotta walk real fast, keep in line with everybody else, and it's just, I like it a little bit. I like cities, but I like to be able to chill a little bit.
Ένα σιδεραναμένο έχω στην καρδιά. Είναι η δική σου αγάπη που με τυραννά. Θα έχω σ' όλη τη ζωή μου βάρος στη συνείδησή μου για τα τόσα σφάλματά μου που σε διώξαν μακριά μου. Έφυγε, την έχω χάσει και γυρνώ και ρωτώ και τους δρόμους έχω πιάσει.
You're a perfectionist, and even when it comes to the smallest details on your novels, you pay attention. How exhausting is that for you and for the people around you?
It's a challenge, I guess, for me and the people around me. When I'm writing a book, it's a pretty intense time for me, especially in the first couple of months, because, like I said, I don't outline, I don't really know what I'm doing yet. I'm just writing every day. And that's kind of a scary time, and because you're trying to find your feet, right? And the book, you're trying to find the book, and you don't know if you're going to be able to do it. And history shows that I have done it in the past. That's the only thing I have to go on now, is history. But it's still, I can be a little bit remote and distant for the people around me in that period. But I do feel like I've got to get it right. I'm really, the biggest fear that somebody like me has is that somebody's going to say, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He didn't get it right. That's not the house on the corner of 9th and Upshur, and police don't do that. The radio code is different than the one he used, and I'm scared to death of that, I'm not scared of somebody saying, well, his prose wasn't great, or I didn't like the story. It's like, he got it wrong. Don't ever tell me I got it wrong, because, I'm really trying as hard as I can.
And that doesn't get better after 19 books.
No, because I want to. I don't want to coast. I want to write better. I want the 19th book to be better than the 18th book always. And 10 years from now, I want people to say he's a better writer than he was 10 years ago. That's my goal, always, to get better.
You are so demanding of yourself and of your close ones?
No, I'm not demanding of them, I don't think.
Going back to the question about your wild youth, what if your children follow your steps?
I mean,
in your steps?
My sons, look, boys go through a bad period, right? Most of them, many of them. I did. And there's a science to this. The brain is different when you're a teenager. A boy's brain is different. When a boy's brain, they look at it, and they've done tests, and the majority of a teenage boy's brain is given over to adrenaline and impulse, that sort of thing. Then they look at the same guy's brain when he's 22, 23 years old, and the majority of the brain is now conscience and, serenity and all these things that are kind of like nice. So I went a little crazy, when I was younger. And it's what boys do, a lot of them, not all of them. I see a lot of kids are, better than I was. But my sons did the same thing. They got into trouble too. And I tried to remember that, you're going to be all right. It took me a long time. I mean, they're already much more mature for their age than I was. I was still getting into trouble. I was arrested for a bunch of stuff when I was 28 years old. And that's old. I had to grow up eventually.
And you did. Wild kids tend to be conservative adults.
I don't know. I'm not conservative.
Journalists always ask you about your going to church weekly.
Greek journalists.
Greek. And no, I've read several interviews, American and British, and they come to that question always.
Yeah. Well,
what impresses them?
I think it's unusual, probably. It's not a... They want me to be a cool guy because that's my reputation. So, it's sort of uncool to say that you go to church. It's like saying you love your mother or something like that, which I do also and always talk about. But, it's the way I grew up. And the church was... I'm not a super religious guy or a Jesus freak or anything like that. So I want to make that clear because I don't claim to know anything more than anybody else does about that. But I like going because it's a morning of peace for me. I can just sort of reflect. It's very quiet. But the main reason I go is because I can see everybody, the community that I grew up with, my parents' friends, my friends, their kids. We all come together in this one place once a week. And there's no other place like that in D.C. There's no Greek town or anything like that. It's my place, and I've tried to do the same thing for my kids because here's the thing is I'm not going to be around forever. Just like my father's gone now. When I go to church and I see his friends still around, I see my dad, And I want them to see me in the community also when I'm gone, to be able to do that. And that's how you do it, in my opinion.
Your dad, though, when you had these financial and other problems, you kept the diner for a small period. Your dad wanted you to study, and you ended not finishing college, and not graduating from college, but you are very highly educated.
Well, I did end up finishing college eventually, yeah.
But you are educated. He must have been very proud.
Well, my dad got to see, he got to see what happened to me, and he knew I was working on the Pacific when he died. He got to see a lot of things that I had accomplished, but the biggest thing that happened between us in our lives was when I was 19, he got sick, and he had cancer and a heart attack in the same year, and he had to stop working. And I dropped out of college to run the diner because we didn't have insurance and we would have lost everything, And because I had grown up working in there, I knew what to do. I knew how to run it. So, between you and me, I didn't want to be in college anyway. It was more fun for me to be downtown, talking to secretaries, having my own little business. It was fun. It wasn't a hardship. But he never forgot it. And I know that he looked at me differently after that than he had before because, as you have pointed out many times, I was kind of a wild guy. I was in and out of trouble and so on. It didn't look like I was going to amount to much. But after I did that for him, everything that I did afterwards was all right with him, because of that. And it sort of cemented our relationship for the rest of our lives.
You have thousands of fans all over the world, including President Obama. One of your books was advertised. The writer Obama reads during his holidays. He's a fan of yours. Have you actually met?
No, I've tried. I'm still waiting for my invitation to the White House. We did get invited for like sort of a Greek American day where it's politics. They bring a bunch of Greeks into the White House and they reach out to them, you know, and all they did was they kind of walked them through. I was like, you know, don't you want to shake my hand? You know, it's me. But I hope to meet him someday. I'm a big fan of his. You know, I think he's been a great president.
Which things you give him credit for?
Well, under his watch, we've got universal health care. We've never had that. Anybody that wants health insurance can get it. And if you're sick, you can still get health insurance. There's no such thing as a pre-existing condition exclusion, okay? That's a big thing. Gay marriage in most of the states in the United States is legal. Marijuana is becoming legal in many states. He just, by executive order, passed an immigration reform bill, which is huge. All these things he's done. And, you know, his enemies say he's ineffective, he's weak, and all that. He's not. He's none of those things. History is going to bear it out that he's been one of our best presidents, I think.
Do you care about reviews?
Reviews? Mm-hmm. I read the New York Times review because it's very important to what happens to my book. And I read the Washington Post review, which is my hometown. And then I really don't read the other reviews.
They both, now that you've mentioned that, very flattering on your work.
That's good. I have no negative comment about that.
Working as a writer varies much from working as a script writer because it's a teamwork. Which one you prefer?
Well, I love writing novels because it's all mine. You know, it's 100% mine. I live and die by it. My name's on the book. If you don't like it, you blame me. You know, but if you like it, I did it. I wrote it. The very thing that I'm talking about is the opposite of that is what I actually like about working in television, is that I get to collaborate with a lot of different artists and make something together. And I don't mean other writers, because that's kind of working with other writers is sort of the hard part of it. So people with a lot of big egos, including me, and they clash a lot, you know. Well, but the other artists I'm talking about are hair and makeup people, costume designers, cinematographers, locations, all these people that come together to make this thing. I find that really interesting. And also, if I write a book in 6 months in my house, I'm alone that whole period of time in a room, and I get socially retarded. You know, I forget how to deal with people and have fun and interact and everything. So the exact opposite, the other 6 months of the year, I'm on a film set. I'm working with 100 people every day, interacting with people, and it's great, you know.
Making up for the lost months.
Exactly, yeah.
But you're possessed by the stories and the characters.
Yeah. It's very hard to be a screenwriter if you are a freelance and you're just writing a script at home and you send it into the company, the production company. The reason I like producing is I can really get to know the characters day by day, the actors and everything, and it gets really, really, it gets into your blood, and the scripts get better and better. The more time you spend on set, the better your writing is. And that's how, you know, yeah, it gets deep into your blood, but it makes the writing better.
Every 3 to 4 books you change your leading character. Why you do that?
I'm trying not to be too successful. And I get bored, you know. I don't want to write the same book over and over again. I just can't, I can't do that. And nobody ever said, you know, let's say there's a guy that's written 20 books with the same character. Nobody ever said, well, the 18th book was better than the 3rd one. Nobody ever says that, because it's not better. It can't be, you know? And the boredom shows up in the writing. So that's not me, not going to do that.
Did you ever consider of changing genre?
Yeah, I thought about it. I mean, I'd love to write a Western. I've always wanted to write a Western. I love them. I don't know if I have the chops, you know, because I'm a city guy. What do I know about it? I have to learn to ride a horse or something. It's easy for me to walk down the street and get material for my books. The crime novel is perfect for me because this is where all these these neighborhoods where I write about are where all these social conditions are occurring that what I really want to write about is that. I don't care that much about the crimes themselves, although I find it interesting, but that's not what the books are about. And this arena that I'm writing in, you know, that's where everything's happening that I want to talk about. So I think the crime novel is a perfect way for me. Plus, I need an engine, like a narrative engine and conflict, so I can keep the story going for me.
Who, including school teachers, influenced you most?
Well, teachers, I had a few good teachers that really made an impression on me in my life. And one of them was a Greek woman, Estelle Petrolakis, who was taught Sunday school with my mother. She was also a teacher in the D.C. public schools. She gave me books throughout my childhood, always encouraged me, wrote little things in the books, you know, keep going, George, keep reading, all that, and I'll never forget her. I would say the work ethic that I got from my parents was very influential to me. It's why I work as hard as I do. I just feel that it's a natural thing for an adult to do because I watched my parents do it when I was a kid. That was the biggest gift they gave me. It wasn't anything material that they gave me. It was the example. It was huge for me, you know. And you know, that's everybody in my family. My sisters were 10 years older than I am. They were out in the world before I was, and I saw them kind of marching out there and getting to work. And
Mr. Pelecanos, you are presented through the press, I mean, as a kid that had no connection to books or reading, and all of a sudden started to write.
Yep.
And I was to ask you, how did you manage, you know, to cover all these gaps of knowledge? Okay, the talent was there, but you had also, you know, to find the words, the tools to tell your stories.
it's true. You have to. I can't gloss over it and say anybody can do this because it's not true. There has to be some natural talent there. And there were times when I was growing up where a teacher would say to me, you know, you're a pretty good writer. Like, you know, you can, but I didn't know what to do with that or how I would then go from A to B, you know. So in college I had this teacher that turned me on to novels. I'd never really read novels before. Crime novels. It was a class in crime fiction. And I decided in my senior year of college, I decided, well, that's what I want to do. So I had a sort of a mission, but I knew that I had a lot of work to do before I could get there. So what I did was, for the next 10 years, I read all the books I could. I read 2 or 3 books a week for 10 years, crime novels mainly, to try to figure out how it was done and so on. And while I was working a series of jobs, you know, I was working in bars and restaurants and things like that. I was always working, but I was reading the whole time too. And then I was 31 years old, and I decided to try it. And I did. I wrote my first novel in notebooks in longhand because I couldn't afford a computer, word processor, and didn't know what I was doing. It took me a year to write the book because I didn't know what I was doing. I rewrote it 3 times in longhand, and then I typed it up on a typewriter, and I sent it to New York, blind, to a publisher that I'd just seen. They published a lot of mystery novels.
Only one publisher?
Only one.
Why that?
Well, I thought, if they don't want it, I must not be any good. It's true. And a year later, they called me up and they said, we just picked up your book off the floor and we want to buy it. We started reading it and we want to buy it. That's what happened.
When actually you start making a living out of your books?
I was, right after that, I got a job for these 2 Greek gentlemen in Washington, Jim and Ted Pettis. They owned 80 movie theaters in Washington, D.C., and they started to produce and distribute films. And they'd actually produced 3 of the early Coen Brothers films. But I went to work for them to distribute foreign films, specifically John Woo's film, The Killer. That's where I started with them. And I was with those guys for 9 years, and I was writing books at night. And I published 8 novels in that period. And at the end of that time, one of my books was picked up for the movies, and I was hired to write the screenplay. And it was a good sum of money for me at the time. now I would say, well, don't quit your job, you know, don't, it's kind of stupid to quit your job, but I did. I quit my job. And then subsequently, my book started to get popular in Europe first, and then European journalists were writing about me, and American journalists started reading those reviews and those essays, and they'd say, who's this guy? He lives in Washington. We don't even know who he is. And then they started writing about me, and things accelerated. And so it was 8 novels into my career before I could quit. And right around that time, I started getting work as a screenwriter and writing for television and so on. And that's when everything kind of blew up.
When you were young, did you ever daydream of being that successful?
My dreams were not about success. They were about making movies and writing things, you know. Seriously. I mean, I used to make up movies in my head that I was directing. And especially when I was delivering food for my dad around the city. And to kill time, because I'm carrying food all over the city, I would make up these movies, and that, you know, that I was the director of, and I had the music for them and everything, you know. And every week I would do a different movie, and that's all I wanted to do. I didn't equate it with money, or you know, or being on a television show like I am today. I mean, I didn't equate it with any of that stuff. It was all about, will I ever be able to make a movie, or will I ever be able to write a story? And that was what my dreams were about. And so I've, you know, everything else that's happened has been sort of a bonus, but it's not really what I wanted. What I wanted, I have it now. I get people pay me to write books and make television and movies, and that's what I always wanted to do. I mean, how many people get to realize their dreams, you know? I mean, seriously, when you're a kid, every kid has dreams. It's fantastic.
Cinema influenced your writing?
Huge. It was a huge influence. It was much, like I said, I never read books, so everything that I got out of my sense of story and so how to tell a story comes from the movies. And fortunately, I grew up in the golden age of films. The 70s was the greatest period of American films in our cinematic history. So, you know, when you're looking at films like The Godfather, and Scorsese's films and Sam Peckinpah's films and all these great, that's what I wanted to do, and it's translated into my books. I think cinematically, you know, that's where the stories come from originally.
How did music influence you, in the sense that your scripts have a rhythm?
Yeah, I listen. I mean, you know, they do have a rhythm. I write. There's a rhythm to the prose that it comes out of music, you know. And that's why I listen to music while I'm writing. And but a lot of it goes back to, again, you know, working at my dad's place. They had the radio on in there. It's all black employees except for me and my dad. So the soul stations were on AM. And this was a great period of soul and funk music. The late 60s, early 70s was fantastic. And that's when I started getting my music education and a lifelong love of that kind of music. And and especially in the urban novels that I write, the city novels, the deep ones, you can feel that pulse in the prose, I think.
You wanted your name to be connected to something good, and you also do a lot of charity work, and you do as much good as you can. Yeah,
I try. I mean, I'm out there doing a lot of stuff. I don't like to sit around and do nothing. I can't write all day, so. I'm connected to the reading programs in the schools in the inner cities and in prisons and juvenile detention facilities. That's my main thing. I'm also on the board of the D.C. Library Foundation, which builds libraries all over the city. And we raise money for new libraries and so on, because I think the library is the heart of any city.
Now that your name is connected to something good, what are you dreaming about?
Well, it's the books I haven't written yet, and the movies and television that I haven't yet produced. and written. That's always on the horizon for me, and I am not going to retire, so there's a lot ahead of me.
It's true, and thank you so very much, Mr. Pelecanos, for your time and for the truth you shared with us.
Thank you.
Good luck to the double. Καληνύχτα, κυρίες και κύριοι.